There was a time I believed I was the only one, the exception. Then my mother gave me a book. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Dr. Maya Angelou. I must have been in my early teens, so 13, 14, 15, around that age. I remember trying to read it, stumbling through the pages, not fully understanding the weight of her words, only that something about them felt familiar. I didn't have the language for it back then, but I think that's what recognition feels like. When someone else's truth gives yours permission to exist. When someone else's truth gives yours permission to breathe. The book shares her story, her trauma that left her feeling broken and ashamed, and how she stopped speaking for several years. That silence became her way of protecting herself and processing what had happened. And as I read those words, something in me shifted, because whilst I physically spoke, I too had also stopped speaking. My voice had learnt how to hide, to sound fine, to look fine, while staying quiet about the truth. I didn't know it then, but that book sowed something deep in me. And years later, the dot started to dot, and I began to understand what had been happening to me and what had happened to me. Through the pages, Dr. Maya Angelou illustrated a life that felt distant from mine, and yet somehow it spoke to everything I couldn't say. And I remember thinking, one day, that's how I want to be. Free. It showed me that I wasn't alone. And years later, standing in front of a mirror, I saw a woman I had become. Bruised, yes, but still standing, still searching, still here. And in that reflection, I realized my experience was never the exception. It was one of millions. Different faces, different places, same silence, same longing to be seen. That's why I created Like Me, to give language to what's been lived, to remind me, remind us that even in our most isolated moments, we are never alone. And let me be very clear, this isn't going to be a place to bond over trauma. Like Me is where we bond to thrive. Welcome, I'm JK. This is where raw truths meet reflection, where I challenge social narratives, explore self-advocacy, and move beyond surviving life-changing experiences into courage, self-insurance, and thriving. Because if you're anything like me, you'll recognize that life is for living and living freely. Hashtag our time to thrive. Before we go any further, a quick note. In this episode, I may talk about experiences of sexual harm, depression, and suicide. Please take good care of yourself as you listen. Let's begin. We have to address an ugly truth. The scale of gender-based violence isn't getting any better, it's getting worse. And every year, the numbers rise. When it comes to sexual violence, the gap between what happens and what's seen is massive. In the year to March 2022, an estimated 798,000 women in England and Wales experienced sexual assault or attempted assault. That's about 3.3% of all women aged 16 and over a lifetime. Around 1 in 4 women report having been raped or sexually assaulted since the age of 16. Yet, only about 2.6% of recorded rape cases result in a charge or summons. And for FGMC, a crime with deep roots in gendered and cultural violence, police forces have recorded hundreds of alleged cases, but convictions remain almost non-existent. And child sexual abuse is often hidden too. In 2023 to 2024, official data from England and Wales showed a sharp rise in recorded cases. Lifetime prevalence is staggering. About 1 in 5 adults report experience in some form of abuse as a child. Physical abuse surveys tell a similar story, with roughly 1 in 14 young people saying they've experienced it. And then there's organised exploitation we don't like to talk about. The girls trafficked through gangs, used and discarded. Over 200 were recorded as sexually exploited. And in Rotherham alone, over a decade, an estimated 1,400 children were sexually exploited, a brutal reminder of how abuse thrives where systems fail. So when I say the silence is loud, I mean it. Every statistic is only a fraction of the truth. For every experience counted, there are countless others that never enter a survey, a court, or a headline. What we know is devastating, but what we don't know is even more devastating and louder. When the Me Too movement went global in 2017, it felt like a microphone had just been exploded on the globe around the world. For the first time in a long time, millions of women and men felt seen and heard. Experiences that had been whispered, hidden, or dismissed were suddenly being spoken out loud. In the UK, that visibility moved numbers. Reports of sexual offences climbed, not because more harm suddenly happened overnight, but because more of us felt able to name it, to report it, to say this happened to me, to say me too. Between 2017 and 2022, police recorded sexual offences almost doubled, reaching the highest levels ever seen. And here's the part we don't always talk about. That spike didn't mean the system caught up. It just showed how many experiences had been sitting in the shadows. And now, years later, in 2025, the data tells an interesting story. The numbers have dipped slightly since 2022, about 2%. But it's not a collapse, more like a plateau. Reporting hasn't fallen back to pre-Me Too levels, it's just steadied. Which says something really important, that the conversation stuck. Awareness is still high, but maybe, for some, hope in the system is wearing thin. Because while more of us are speaking, most cases still don't make it to court. Many are dropped due to lack of evidence, and the people behind the statistics, they still live with the aftermath. So yes, Me Too changed the landscape. It made the unseen seen. But the battle isn't over. It's evolving. And maybe the next wave isn't about shouting louder. Maybe the next wave is about building systems that actually listen. These numbers aren't abstract to me. Behind every statistic is a life interrupted. And for a long time, one of those lives was mine. I know what it feels like to have my truth questioned, to be asked to drop the case, to be called names in my DMs, to have people call my mother asking her to persuade me to walk away. I know what it's like to become so disconnected from my own life that I can't remember chunks of it, to wake up sweating with tears on my pillow after a flashback dream. I know what it's like to become a number in someone else's report, to live through something so personal it becomes impersonal. And while my story, my experience is my own, it's also a reflection of thousands of others who may never ever tell theirs. Like Me isn't just a title, It's a declaration. It's an acknowledgement and a quiet nod to those millions with whom I share a lived experience. Those I may never meet, the ones who know what it means to live through something and still choose to keep living. And to the angels, the ones who didn't make it, their stories, your experiences, your strength and your spirit, they're not forgotten because you're part of this too. Because at its core, like me isn't just my experience, it's a shared truth that we are not alone in our becoming. And that's why I created Like Me podcast, to give space to the experiences behind the silence and to explore the questions that don't always have easy answers. Because individuals like me who've experienced sexual harm often carry layers of questions and frustrations, some loud, some very deep. Questions like, who am I now? Will I ever feel like myself again? Why do I still feel broken when everyone says I'm strong? Then there's the confusion of being told to move on while still learning how to trust again, even your own body. The ache of not being believed, the quiet rage at systems that protect everyone but you. And yet, underneath all of it, there's a search for meaning, a quiet, persistent hope that asks, can beauty still come from this? Like Me is where I ask those questions out loud, where I move from survivor mode to thriving and share what that truly means. Because surviving isn't about endurance, but thriving is about expression, self-trust, and returning home to yourself. That's the journey I'm on here, moving from victim to survivor to thriver, from being defined by what happened to mastering how to live beyond it. Through shares, reflections, and truth, this podcast is about raising the frequency from pain to possibility, from silence to self-mastery. Because thriving isn't pretending the past didn't happen. It's learning to build something beautiful from it. That's the purpose of this podcast, to remind myself, to remind anyone who's interested that being a survivor is not the end game. There's so much more to become, more to create, and more to live for than the experience that began it all. So, before I end this episode, please take a deep breath with me. In for 4, through the nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. And out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let it go. Because even in the pause, you're still rising, still becoming, still here. And just to wind or wrap this episode up, I want to honour the words of a woman whose strength and grace have guided me and guided generations, Dr. Maya Angelou, with an extract from her poem, Still I Rise. It's a reminder of what resilience sounds like, what it feels like to stand up again. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Thank you for listening to this episode of Like Me podcast. If anything I've shared has made you stop, think, or see yourself just a little bit clearer, fantastic. I love this for you. I love this for me. And honestly, I love this for us. And if this episode shifted something in you, give yourself a moment to sit with it. And if anything felt a little bit too heavy, speak to someone you trust. What I've learnt is that we don't heal in isolation, and you don't have to carry any of this alone. This space isn't about staying in survival mode. It's about lifting ourselves out of the dimension that has tried to keep us trapped, and choosing a version of ourselves that's still becoming. If this resonates with you, share with someone who might need a reminder or a friend. And make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. I'm JK. Stay open, stay self-curious, and remember, it's our time to thrive.